Got my man Scoop B, Brandon Robinson here with me today, NBA National Insider for Bally Sports. How you doing, brother?
So far, so good. A lot of going on in the world of Minnesota. Minnesota is forever busy.
Chet Holmgren was announced he's done for the season with a right foot injury. That is a huge loss for the Thunder, of course, but also, a huge loss for, I think, Minnesotans who wanted to see him perform this year.
Definitely heartbreaking. And it's interesting because when you look at just basketball at large this summer, the offseason has been just as important as the season that is soon to come, whether it's where Kyrie and KD end up, where the Lakers move and groove. But a lot of those guys were participating in some sort of summer thing, whether it's Drew League, whether it's the crossover league and more. And it's definitely disappointing to see Chet not be able to play this season because this is somebody who definitely has a state behind him, but more than anything else, he's just that talented. I mean, you look at his size, his ability to get to the basket at will, score, do a myriad of different things. What I am concerned about is where teams in the league ultimately make their stars do. Like it kind of reminds me of like the sitting out for scrimmages or the Olympics or just even extreme sports. I think that this may be the catalyst for, okay, we all got excited for the video highlights in the off season, and this guy is participating here, this guy is going here. It makes me wonder if that kind of sets the tone for what's next. And it's interesting because, the NBA did a lot of partnerships on the streaming side with the Drew League and the crossover league and more. It seems like it's an isolated incident, but I think for him, he's making a name for himself. And he saw the bright lights and he went hard. Unlike somebody like LeBron, like he's going to go hard, but go hard to a point. And I think when you look at guys like Chet Holmgren, you got to kind of treat this like an all-star game, no defense, casually running up and down the court because nobody's trying to get hurt.
And to your point, I mean, like the NFL, I believe, is a little bit more restrictive on things their guys can do in the offseason. I mean, a lot of leagues already want to make sure they want to protect their product, their stars, the futures of their games. And like, you're going to be out here doing, whatever it is that you do and getting hurt doing it. Like that's hurting the bottom line for everybody. And of course, for the athlete in particular, that was a curiosity of mine. Like, does this cause the league to say, well, where do we hit the brakes on some of this stuff?
And it might be a team-to-team situation. I think that other than Chet Holmgren, have we really seen any other players not only get hurt, but then are sitting out for the season? And then as I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about this is his redshirt year. We had this conversation a few years ago about players and whether this constitutes as their rookie season and more. And I think there's just something special about I went to college for 5 years and I enjoyed that process. There's something about having just a year of grace. And I because there were already people that felt as though Chet was going to be a problem. And so when you're in a situation where you have the opportunity to sit, learn, and grow, no better place than Oklahoma, specifically because they're building something special. And I know we're going to talk about the Timberwolves in a minute. But when you look at the Oklahoma City Thunder and their youth movement and just the plethora of draft picks that they have coming up and just how they've been rebuilding post going to the finals in 2012 and playing the Miami Heat. I just think that he's in a good situation. If it was like a Lakers team, or if it was the Nets, or if it was the Heat, or even if it was the Timberwolves, I think it would be a different story. I think Chet is in a space where he can grow, he can learn, and he can heal and be productive when he comes back. I still think he's in a good situation despite the doldrums of not being able to play.
Mm-hmm. So as we start to talk about the rest of the West, we start with the Timberwolves, our biggest intrigue right now. Tim Connelly got in there, president of basketball operations, and immediately started swinging for the fences. I mean, I'm looking at the list of transactions they've made, just before getting him in here. Of course, they signed Pat Bev to that contract extension, which they ended up trading him. They got Taurean Prince at a veteran extension. Then, of course, July 6th rolls around. They get Rudy Gobert. Pat Bev's out the door. Malik Beasley's out the door. Leandro Amaro's out. Jared Vanderbilt, Walker Kessler's draft rights, and 4 first-round draft picks and a 2026 first-round draft pick swap. So I know there are a lot of opinions, a lot of chatter back and forth about, like, did they break the trade market? Is this a move that you make when you believe you're going to go all in and try to win this thing? Or is this just a big move just to say you made a big move? But just the list of things they've done beside that. I mean, you got Kyle Anderson here, Wendell Moore's here, Brent Forbes, Austin Rivers, Josh Minot's here. It's a lot that the Timberwolves are doing in this offseason. And they even just got Luka Garza and CJ Elleby the other day. So what do you make of this?
I joke on Twitter a lot and just say the Timberwolves are busy, and everybody knows what I'm saying. It's been a thing the last year, and they're proving why they're busy. This is a team that is building now to keep Karl Anthony Towns happy. You see that not only did they make all those moves in the offseason, but D'Angelo Russell hasn't budged, someone who is very close and dear to his heart. And I think that when you look at what the Timberwolves are doing in good faith, they're proving that last season was not a fluke. And I look at the Western Conference at large and 2 teams that I think nobody really saw coming and doing much. And the Timberwolves would be in that pot of goulash. But in addition to that, you'd add the New Orleans Pelicans, who have been doing what they need to do to compete in a very competitive Western Conference. What I make of this is that the Timberwolves are here to stay, and they're adding veteran pieces. I think even adding Kyle Anderson, I think was ingenious, specifically because I think he was in a situation in Memphis where they just were flooded with talent. You saw that in the offseason. Then D'Anthony Melton found his way to Philadelphia, and I look at Melton and I look at Kyle Anderson as 2 guys who weren't the key to started the engine, but they were part of the engine and part of the oil and part of the windshield wipers that was part of the fabric of that high octane offense. And so Kyle Anderson specifically, for me, he is there for Minnesota, is their version of a 6'8" playmaker like Sean Livingston. I think he can be a veteran presence that can do so much, and he's trusted. I think any great team, they have that process. I mean, even it doesn't seem that he's going to play this season, but even Danny Green coming to in the fold in the offseason. I spent some time with Danny Green. We were both at the National Association of Black Journalists Convention, and Danny and I go back to LA, and he shared with me that he'd hope to play at least 2 to 3 more years in the league. So if he's on the mend and he's healing, I'm interested to see if there's a way that he can stay. I remember a couple of seasons ago in Memphis comparatively, where Iguodala was a member of the Grizzlies for a while, and he didn't want to, he ended up not even playing and was traded ultimately to the Miami Heat. I'd like to see Danny Green revive his role comparatively from that Iguodala situation and play a role. I know I'm talking in circles right now, but what I will say to you is this. Ultimately, when you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves and you look at what they're doing, I think they're building something special. I think that they're doing something where they're competing with the Dallas Mavericks. They're competing with the world champions, the Golden State Warriors. And I think even when people are frustrated at the world that is the Los Angeles Lakers, I think they're still competitive in the West if healthy. So whatever they're going to be, I look at Minnesota and I think that they can compete with the Phoenix Suns. I think that they can compete with some of those other teams in the Western Conference, and at least roster-wise, I think that they have a puncher's chance to do so because you created a core. The other thing that I like about the Timberwolves specifically is this. I like the fact that Karl doesn't have to play the 5. When you look at 4 or 5 positions, like Karl, like Anthony Davis, will begrudgingly play the 5. But I think people of their skill set, again, using Anthony Davis and Karl, and both where they're from, Chicago, New Jersey, their style of play, big men handle the rock. Big men push the ball on the break. Big men can shoot threes. And I think that you saw last season that if you give Karl the opportunity to just play loosey-goosey, but still within a system, he's not going to disappoint. And so I think the fact that you have D'Angelo Russell still there, you have Karl still there, and you add Rudy Gobert. What did they call him? The leaning tower of what?
Stifle Tower, I think, is the one we were looking for.
Okay.
Stifle Tower. Rudy Gobert. That's the one they've called him that for like 10 years.
Contrary to certain people's belief system, I do like the move to bring in Gobert, because I think that every superhero needs a bat signal, needs a cool ride, needs an Alfred, and needs a pretty girl. And the pretty girl is the trophy.
Amen.
And even with Rudy, like him being in Utah, I spent some time with him this past season, and I asked him, what has changed in his life professionally since maybe pre-COVID or more. And he said just a desired focus to do more and to do better. And I think you saw flashes of it in the playoffs this past season. This is not somebody you need 20 or 30 points from. You just need him to stand there. If we could create a builder player on NBA 2K, he would be Dennis Rodman and Dikembe Mutombo in one for Minnesota. Rebound the ball, stick your hand up and block shots, and from time to time, talk smack. His presence is going to alter his opponent's shots. It's also another veteran. I talked about Kyle Anderson, veteran. And I'll say this, I really do think that the Timberwolves and their rhythm really began with the addition of Pat Beverly the season before. I think that Pat Beverly, in his own way, had an impact on the Timberwolves, similarly to how Vince Carter had influence on the Hawks and Trae Young and some of those other guys. Jamal Crawford had with the Phoenix Suns. Pre-Chris Paul and Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton were still there when they were the opening act in the bubble. I think that this Timberwolves team, they've had the right mix, and now they're prime and ready. It's time to serve the main course.
To your points, a lot of them, Pat Bev's influence, as we kind of just mentioned, made a huge difference. I mean, he was seasoned. He is a seasoned trash talker, very good at those things, and brought a little bit of edge to the guys in ways that I think they responded to and really appreciated. And as far as the general frustration I think people have had with Karl Anthony Towns is his reluctance to generally be the five guy. We've already talked about this. He doesn't need to. If you've got all this construction like that, and then you have Anthony Edwards in there who will also talk his noise whenever he's feeling up to it. How far do you think this squad can go?
I think as constructed currently, I can see him in second round of conference finals. We haven't had time to look at a whole half of season, but when I look at this Timberwolves team, I think that the Timberwolves have had range in roster construction and just bringing in marquee guys and people actually wanting to be there. We've not seen that since maybe 2003, 2004, when you had any iteration of Kevin Garnett, Wally Zerviak, Latrell Sprewell, who's feeding his family at the time. Rasho Nesterovic, like you just got guys that want to be there. And it kind of gives me Cleveland vibes when LeBron was there a second time. When LeBron was first in Cleveland, ain't nobody want to come to Cleveland. And 2016 they win a championship with Kevin Love and others. So I look at this Timberwolves team like not only do they have a competitive roster, you got guys who actually want to be there and play there. So, I've spoken to Kevin Garnett about this and, specifically about Karl Towns. And one of the things that he's thankful for is that he had a chance to actually play with Karl early in Karl's career in Minnesota. He believes he's the one. He's glad that not only was he able to mentor him and leave his DNA and his imprint within his mentee, but it's largely welcomed and congratulated not just by Karl, but Karl's family. His dad has spoke reverently just about how well the Timberwolves organization speaks of him or treats his son, but also the KG influence has been on him. And, Karl's dad has been his coach throughout, and he still coaches locally in New Jersey, but throughout his career. But if there's one person who has Karl's ear, it's Kevin Garnett. and one person who's able to just really lift his spirits, but also just be that guy, a guy who's been here, a guy who knows the ins and outs of Minnesota. And even though Kevin Garnett, won a championship in Boston, he still came back. And it's a whole new regime now, with A-Rod as the part of the ownership group. It really seems as though this team is on the right path with the personnel. Now you just got to go out there and produce.
That's really the big part of this. I've had some time to really observe and get to know a lot of the staffing, the coaching, some of the ownership. I talked to the other partner in the ownership group, Mark Laurie, and he's very much all in on let these guys get what they need. Let's back them up. Let's just pay attention to what they want, what they need. How do we work with them? How do we help them be the best versions of themselves? And they do this up and down the organization, not just the roster. Then looking at the coaching, Chris Finch, and in my initial conversations with him, he's like, we like framework. We don't like to dictate too much. Like give guys, put them in positions where they're strongest, put them in situations where they can operate, let them thrive, and then ultimately get them to a point where it's an instinct thing for them. Let them play ball, let them go ahead and do their thing. And then of course I was loving that they had Elson Turner in here on staff. So he and my father go way back to college. Oh, wow. Yeah. So he's, to having him around, I'll say, okay, so we certainly have veteran presences, we have seasoned ideas here, and we certainly have the ability to kind of turn these guys loose and let them go and ball. This is going to be a fun one. I think we, again, going up and down the West, it's going to be an interesting year in the NBA. So I'm kind of excited for it myself.
I'm excited too. And the Chris Finch dynamic to me is so impressive because this is a guy 3 years ago, that was sought out by many teams, namely the Pelicans. Just a guy who can create culture, almost like a adult college atmosphere, if you will. And it's interesting because even though I know with the Pelicans, they ended up going with Willie Green. Willie Green is doing some of the same things in New Orleans that Chris and his staff are doing right there in Minnesota. And I think that is just like a college coach in the NBA, it seems, but just revised.
Well, what else you got going on in your life? What else you want to talk about? Anything going on with you?
Bally Sports. Been there. It's my 2.5 season over there as their national NBA insider. So we're doing a lot of stuff there. I have a few segments there. In addition to breaking news, I have a Scoopies notebook where we analyze different things that are more news magazines. So we recently did, we've zeroed in on J. Cole's influence on basketball. So we talked to Dreamville artist Omen. We talked with Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets. We talked to other people who are tied to Dreamville and more. We zeroed in on Ice Cube's Big Three and just what they've done. We went to a tryout and we looked at that. Mother's Day, we looked at how NBA wives are not only wives of players, but they're entrepreneurs and they have a myriad of other things. And then I have my show weekly on Spotify Live platform called Scoopy Sources. And then I do some stuff in addition with that with my brand partnership with Bovada, which is sports betting. So have my hands in a few things, as well as Zenny Optical, who is the official sponsor of the Bulls. I do branded content with them. So Bally's my day-to-day, but Zenny, Bovada, and Spotify take up my time when I'm not over at Bally.
All over the place. I love it. Scoop B, appreciate your time today, man. I'll let you get to it. I know you got a busy one ahead of you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, brother.
My pleasure. Thank you.